Welcome to everybody. It's really lovely to see you here, and some familiar faces and some new faces for me anyway. I'm really delighted to be able to offer this space, a chance to tune into yourself and tune into your own creativity, whether that feels very close to you at the moment or something that doesn't feel familiar to you. We'll have a chance to play, to breathe, to connect with each other. Creativity, and including creativity can take many forms. You're quite likely very creative in your caring, because caring roles require a lot of adaptability and continual shifting and shifting of approaches, etc. I don't need to tell you what caring requires. I'm sure you could teach me a lot about it. So this is a space for you. And I want to congratulate you on carving out that space for yourself, that time, some time and space for yourself to be present with yourself, and to give yourself some attention. And that might be a rare thing in your day-to-day world, or maybe you do manage to claim space and attention and time and energy for yourself. And here's an opportunity, an hour and a half. Wow. I feel that there are many possible potential benefits of tuning into creativity, and we'll whoosh into, well, before I do much more talking, basically this is an experiential session mainly. It's a workshop, it's not a lecture. You won't be having, well, you will be listening to me, maybe guiding you through exercises or processes, but it's not all a one-way thing. And I will invite you to engage with different playful processes and doing whatever feels comfortable to you. That's something I want to say, is if I suggest something and you kind of go, no, that doesn't feel right, tune into yourself and trust your own authority on that. You're the authority of you. And also to say that it's possible that, kind of as Matthew was alluding to, it's possible that if there is a chance, if and when there is a chance to share or show something, it might be quite personal. And so to let you know that whatever is shared here is confidential. It will be edited out. Any of your responses will be edited out of the video recording. And as Matthew said, it's primarily so that other people who aren't present can get a chance to have some art for wellbeing guidance from me. How about, as a way of tuning into yourself and kind of locating yourself in space, well, let's just breathe first. If you're okay to close your eyes for a moment. It's been a lot of talk. And so kind of letting yourself land into your body, onto the chair, if you're sitting on a chair. Taking a pause from everything else in the world, in your life. This is you right now. This is us. And an advantage maybe of being on mute is, and if you're in your own space, you could let go of a grisly sound or a sigh or a yawn, or let yourself on your next couple of out breaths maybe just make a sound, a sigh. Help your body and your whole being to kind of arrive into yourself. Maybe feeling your feet making contact with the floor, perhaps wiggling your toes a bit. So you know that you have feet. And you know that you're in contact with somehow with ground, floor, earth, and noticing the parts of your body that make contact with the chair and with the air and space around you. And maybe see if there's a part of your body that's particularly kind of grisly or gristly or in want of attention, and let yourself send a soothing breath to that part of you. And when you're ready, you might do this with your eyes closed, or you might open your eyes. So the invitation is to notice a sensory object. So it might be something that you're hearing, something that you see when you open your eyes. It's just a something in the room. It might be an item of your own clothing, something that's there in front of you, a fixture, just anything. It's like, it might be a sound of rain or wind or a bird or an aeroplane. It's whatever it is that you notice. Let yourself choose something. And no matter how unexpected it is or ordinary it is, it's an invitation to almost like put your mind and your heart, your mind's eye, into that object, that sensory object, and allow it to say to you, I am, and I offer you. So two things. You allow the, whatever it is, it might be a flower, it might be a jumper that you're wearing that you don't like much, it could be anything. And so it's I am and I offer you, and kind of listen for a response. You might be surprised. You might or might not get something. Your mind might be busy in another way. It's anything that, any of your experience is welcome here. So if you do have something, we might just spend really, really short time, like a minute or 2 minutes, maybe writing it down or just sitting with it, or grabbing a color and doing a blah, blah, blah mark for it. The object, I am, I offer you. Just let yourself go with that. It's fine to just be. This could be a whole workshop, play shop. That's an experience of being. You don't have to be doing. It's okay to simply be with the experience. If you do find yourself jotting something down or doing some mark making, it doesn't have to look like anything. It's just a response. It's just an opportunity, a swift opportunity to kind of connect with yourself, connect with what's present with you via your senses. And maybe finding if you have found yourself doing some writing or mark making or art play, finding a pausing or finishing point. You could always come back to it. You might come back to it during this session. And just notice what's in you now, if anything's shifted from, say, just before arriving here or when you first arrived here. Just notice any thoughts, feelings, sensations. It's quite an unusual little process, I guess, or different from the usual day-to-day anyway, put it that way. And let's have an opportunity, just fairly swiftly, an opportunity to hear something from each other, to speak, to give voice to something. So we won't have a conversation, we won't verbally respond to each other. It's a chance for, it's like we create a kind of a safe, non-judgmental place, environment for each other to share something if you want to share something. If you do, it's really brief. It's just something, and maybe one thing about, it might be what your object was that called to you, your sensory object and its message, or just how that was doing that. And so, yeah, we won't be, and if you show something, that's fantastic. We won't be commenting on anything that each other says or shows. Yeah, so thank you for jumping in already with that first process that might be, well, I don't know, maybe it is familiar to you to have that sort of headspace, but I know for myself, just being caught up in day-to-day, and especially if you're a caregiver, you know, it's like sometimes can be very disconnected from myself, my own body, my own sensory experience, sort of all the energies going out to this other person, so much of it, and and even surroundings. And so that's just a very small exercise that can take 10 seconds even as a possibility to just maybe shift perspective, have connect in with another possibility, another possible way of being in the moment. Yeah. And I'm finding myself doing this, something about shifting perspective. I'll demonstrate it rather than have clever words to talk about it. Yeah. So any questions or things that you want to say before we go to the next creative process? By the way, that was a creative process. So if you've got a piece of paper nearby, and you've got some sort of drawing or mark making implements, you might want to, for this one, you might have, I'm thinking of it in probably 3 parts. So it might be that you have 3 small pieces of paper, or you divide a page up into 3 shapes, or you might do 3 squares or circles or something that you can do things within and around on your paper. So there's something about 3. It's very open. You might find yourself not feeling confined, not wanting to be confined to 3 separate shapes, but it's a kind of a 3-part process that I'll invite you to do. No rules with art making, with creativity, really. And if it's for yourself, it's not for some big production exhibition out there. It's all about nourishing yourself. So once again, if you're okay to close your eyes and connect in with your body in this particular place and your breath. And so it's an opportunity, once again, it's something to do with connecting with your senses. And I reckon just to start off with, maybe just thinking or feeling into something. What's something that you like to hear? Something you like to hear, a sound or sounds that you like to hear. Something that maybe once or sometimes brings you some kind of enjoyment. And just see what comes to you, or listen to what comes to you. And when you're ready, we'll have really just a short amount of time, 3 minutes. We'll have 3 minutes to put something down into one of those areas, one of those 3 areas on the paper. Something in response to what you like to hear. So it might be very abstract. It doesn't have to look like anything. There might be a colour for what you like to hear. There might be a feeling or a gesture for what you like to hear. The main thing is to keep your breathing flowing. Not like, hold my breath, I've got to concentrate, got to force something out here. Ideally not that. Ideally, just let your breath even flow the pastel or texture or pen or whatever it is out onto the paper. And I did say it was going to be swift, so I apologise for that if you're already in the flow and you're kind of going, no, I don't want to stop. If you are, if that is where you're up to, please keep going. That's what we're here for this morning. And if you want to do the next part of this process, maybe close your eyes again for a moment. Notice what's alive in you, what's flowing, what's not flowing, letting it all be there, whatever it is. And let your heart, your mind go to something that you like to see, something in your world that you like to see, something that's a sight that somehow nourishes you. And when you open your eyes, once again, we'll have 3 minutes to make a visual or verbal response on paper to that, something you like to see. So it might come out in the form of a colour or just a gesture or a shape. It doesn't have to look like the actual thing. You don't have, you can let go of that, putting that pressure on yourself. It's just the energy of something that you enjoy seeing, that nourishes your senses. It might be the object that you chose or that chose you before that's still speaking to you in some way, if that was a visual experience. Doesn't have to make sense. Doesn't even have to make sense to your rational mind. It's an opportunity here this morning to be freed up from that always trying to figure things out and problem solve, etc. Doesn't matter if it overlaps with the first lot of mark making that you did. It doesn't matter if it's separate. It's whatever emerges onto the page is fine. Whatever can support you to maybe release some anxiety or agitation, if that's been there this morning, or whatever, you know, if there've been any difficult thoughts or feelings, I guess you might simply use the art making or the writing for that, to let something out onto paper. That's okay. So sometime in the next minute, you might want to pause this particular expression of that came in response to what you like to see, or you might keep going. Really, there's room for both. And if you do if you do pause and then come back to yourself with your eyes closed, once again, just noticing what's happening internally, how you're feeling, thinking, any physical sensations. And the third part of this little process is tuning into something that you like to touch. What's something that you like to touch in your world? Maybe you even made physical contact with it and touched it this morning, or maybe not, maybe it hasn't been for a while. Something you like to touch. Could be a small thing, could be anything. And don't think too hard about it, just see what comes to you. If nothing comes to you, you might actually physically touch an art material and physically touch a piece of paper and see if there's some pleasure or enjoyment in that. And we'll have 3 minutes to get onto paper a shape or a colour or a gesture or whatever it is in response to touch, sense of touch. Once again, let me remind you there's no rules. You don't have to stay within any lines. You can colour out, as I call it, rather than colouring in. You can join things together, experiment with mushing different colours together. It's up to you, entirely up to you to follow. Maybe you let yourself follow the brush or the pastel or the pen or your heart or your hand. We'll have another couple of minutes with this, whatever you want to add or shift or change with this art play. So the two main Sally Swain creativity guidelines are: 1, breathe. 2, be kind to yourself. All else flows from those. I have to remind myself of both of these frequently. And the guidelines haven't changed. They've been going for well over 10 years, I think. If any of you have ever come to anything of mine from a long time ago, perhaps, you might have heard me say exactly the same thing. So if you're okay to find a finishing or pausing gesture with this, what was it, maybe a 3-part creation. And you don't have to. You might want to just keep going. If you're like, once you got here, now you've got here and you got started, it might just be this burning desire to keep going, and that's fine. And so kind of, if you want to, you can come back to closed eyes and breathing and just noticing how that was. Bit of an opportunity to do some art making, or you don't have to think of it as art making if that's too daunting preconceived ideas about art. It might just be playing with colours and shapes and lines. It really doesn't have to fulfill any, it certainly doesn't have to fulfill anyone else's expectations. It's just a tool. And it can be a tool or a window or a doorway to your own soothing and nourishing. So just noticing how that was. Of course, we do have other senses. We have smell and taste, in case you hadn't remembered those. I just thought, well, this is just a brief experience of playing with tuning into 3 of those 5 senses, or you might believe we have more than 5. Yeah, an hour and a half goes fast. So we've got another half hour or so. So just a swift art process. Once again, this one's not in 3 parts, it's just a one thing. And I call it a sensory exploration with paint, or it can be with pastel or whatever materials you feel most comfortable with. So maybe just starting, it might be a fresh piece of paper, or if you don't, well, it might be the back of something, or yeah. So maybe getting yourself something a material that you would like to play with and kind of relax into and spend 10 minutes with, basically. So you've got maybe something really, maybe something, have it there in front of you, because then I'll invite you to close your eyes for a moment. So you might hold a paintbrush or a drawing implement in one hand. It doesn't have to be your dominant hand. It might be whatever you feel to. And know you've got some paper there in front of you, and then close your eyes if you're good for that. And know that this is just a little bit of time to play and explore. Doesn't have to. It might be an extension of doodling. It's not. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. It's just a connection with yourself and with some joys and possibilities of colour and shape and gesture. So maybe let the hand that's holding the implement, maybe letting yourself be aware of that hand, what it feels like. maybe the weight of it or the shape of it to the touch. And let your other hand make contact with the paper. And maybe let it gently explore the paper, just with the hand, just with your fingertips, maybe the pads of your hand, maybe the other side of your hand, your fingernails, getting a sense of temperature, texture. Maybe even there's a sound of your hand moving around the paper. You don't have to force or push anything. It's just maybe a little bit of a tuning in or receiving experiences. A chance to be present. And notice what kind of gestures your hand is making in relation to the paper. Just naturally, as I was talking, I noticed my hand kind of patting and resting on different areas of the paper. Your hand might be doing something quite different. And when you're ready, and you might have already begun, you might either with your eyes closed or your eyes open, I guess maybe depending on what material you're using, you bring the paintbrush or it might be bring the crayon to the paper, or it might, if it's a paintbrush, you might dip it in some water, you might dip it in some paint. And just being with the micro movements, just gently of that. And bringing this implement to the paper. What does that feel like? What does that contact feel like? What's your urge? It might be to move slowly, and it might be to move quickly. It might be heavily, it might be lightly. None of these are right or wrong. They just are your impulses, your creative impulses from moment to moment. Letting yourself breathe and soften and somehow keep going with whatever feels easy or comfortable or interesting, or whatever that pulse or impulse is with moving the art implement on the paper. It might be fast and furious and getting a whole lot of energy out there, or it might be really slow and reflective. It might be, I'm over it with this color, I've got to get another color, or another, mark making implement. Now let yourself follow the brush or the pastel or the pencil. Let it be the leader of what emerges on the page. It might be an instinct or impulse to stay in one part of the paper. It might be that you go all over the paper. There are no expectations here of how you do it or where you go with it. You might experiment with closed eyes and open eyes if it feels nourishing for you to have a play with art materials with your eyes closed. That could be something to keep going with. If it doesn't feel so good for you to have your eyes closed, you don't have to. One approach that can be helpful is to conjure up curiosity, the quality of curiosity. So it's like, oh, so it's almost a scientific type experiment, even though it's not actually scientific. It's, oh, what happens if I put this colour next to this colour? What would happen if I did a little squiggle over this patch here? What would happen if I risked mucking it up? If I followed whatever this current urge is, which might wreck the picture. Excuse me. So we'll have another couple of minutes with this art play. So as we come to finish or pause this creation, see if you can remember the breathing and the self-kindness. So, and even bring the kindness towards your artwork. Let's see if you can, if you were looking at it, see if you can look with kind eyes. Doesn't have to be the best picture of all time or that you ever do in your entire life. It's simply an expression of you for these past minutes. Simply an exploration and a play, an improvisation, like a musical improvisation. Finding your finish or pause for this one, and perhaps sitting with your eyes closed or open, coming back to yourself, noticing what's resonating in you, thoughts, feelings, sensations, what that was like. Might have been enjoyable, might not have been, might have gone through different phases. Thank you, and thank you for showing and sharing, even if you might notice self-judgments come up, which often happens with art making for a lot of people, and especially if it's in a group. And you know, there are lots of ways of working with inner critics. Just thinking, what will we have? Maybe another session, but you know, if there is a way of noticing those critical voices or those evaluative voices with the art making, and doing, and one thing is to do it anyway. Okay, I've got this voice telling me yours is no good, everyone else's is fantastic, how come, and mine doesn't look like what it's supposed to look like. And you notice those voices and you do it. You do kind of like, one way is to just defy it and do it. It's that, like that, feel the fear and do it anyway. That's one way of being with inner critics, and sometimes even becoming aware of those, you know, critical voices is part of the whole journey. And sometimes that awareness itself is helpful. Another way just is to, just while I'm talking about it, is to write out, you know, write that stuff out. You know, it's like, even, you know, it's like give voice, actually let that part of yourself have its voice, because, you know, sometimes it's just going to niggle away, niggle anyway, be on your shoulder. And another, just very briefly, another way is what I call a blurt sheet. So BLURT. So there's all these blurts that might come out that get in the way of luxurious flow of creativity. And so you might have a separate piece of paper where every time one of those judgments comes up, or thing that might get in the way of you enjoying your writing or art making, you put a blurt. You write blurt, or you put a mark there, blurt. You write, you know, blurt, and then you come back to what you're doing. Yeah, so that's three ways of working with that old inner critic, which we've all got in one way or another. For some of us it arises very strongly with art making, but others with sewing, for example. That's one of the, so some of us with driving, you name it. Some of us not so much with art making. Yeah. I worked years ago with a woman who was, I think at the time I was in my 40s, and this woman was 76. I remember that. And she used to travel all the way from the outer western suburbs to come and work with me in Glebe. And she used to stand up while she was working because it was uncomfortable to sit down. And she would go blurt. She'd get a black crayon. And every time she noticed one of those critical voices come up about wasting paper or whatever it was, she'd just go, she'd say blurt, and do a blurt on a piece of paper with a black oil pastel, and then come back to the painting she was doing. So there you go, blurt sheet. And I didn't mean to give a whole little lecture spiel there, but I hope it's helpful. Simone, were you going to say something?
Just yes, that's so helpful. So could you just summarize? It was defy and do it anyway.
Yeah.
And blurt sheet.
Blurt sheet. But also you could write it out. You could have a blurt sheet. You could even write a dialogue with your inner critic. That can be very instructive and mind-blowing, actually. The first time I did that, I couldn't believe how mean and nasty my inner critic was. It's okay, all right, that's what's going on. No wonder I feel like this. And that might be, that can be useful even in other spheres as well. It's like, if it's care, even to do with coming here today, it might have been, taking my own space, and I should be doing this, I should be doing that. Am I, how daring, deliciously or not deliciously daring to give myself this time and space. What a beautiful group. Oh, come back again. Come back in a couple of weeks. It'd be so good to see you again. It was an absolute delight to meet and re-meet or re-meet you and spend time with you today. And I hope, that whatever positive feelings or learnings or tools you got from today, that you carry out into your rest of your day and your week. And it's been a joy. I can't speak on behalf of Carers New South Wales, but from my point, I can speak on behalf of myself. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honour to spend time with you this morning. Wishing you well.